Hi everyone, welcome to our panel. This is a panel organized under the symposium. The title of our panel is Domination and Arts. I am a moderator and a speaker in this panel, but people don't like the moderator to talk too much, so I will try to establish balance. And Emre and Zafer will have lots of things to say, so I will try to be a moderator mostly. But anyhow, I can disrupt the balance. Sorry for that in advance. We are three panelists here. Me, Emre Zeytinoğlu, and Zafer Gençaydın. We'll be talking about domination and arts. When I see this title, there was an equivalence of that in English. Actually, while translating this word to English, we need to look at the issue from three aspects because domination in Turkish is a harsh word and it goes up to the oppression. Domination in Turkish, ruling, being dominant is coming from the same source word. Actually, it is like sentencing someone. Yes, all of them are embedded in this word or term. Domination, dominance, the one ruling are all the same words. So we can expand the concept in our mind. Of course, if we will have a harsher semantic meaning for the word, we see the political context in play and the domination over arts. And there is no doubt that in the 19th century, we see the Nazi regime's domination and oppression over arts. So there is also another period from Soviet Union, from the Stalinist regime. So it is considered to be a regressive form of arts. But we will consider the issue from another perspective. This is what is expected from us with regard to the organizers of the symposium, including Mr. Yahya. We will try to limit the discussion into the artistic field. So the issue of domination or being dominant over this issue will bring something into your mind. For example, code. So the judge decides in line with the codes. It also brings about some norms. These norms and codes are quite effective on the generation of arts or the creation of arts. So I would like to have a brief overview of the recent history with regard to domination. In traditional world, we will be talking about cultural production. The cultural production of the traditional world shows a structure of natural language, and all cultural elements have a function, and a singular language is dominant over arts, but these norms are not transferred, and these norms occur spontaneously in order to fulfill some functions. These are the elements of all traditional cultural production, and this is called supervision or control. There is a singularity or a single-handed control over cultural production. Together with the modernism, these concepts emerged in Europe with the Renaissance, and step by step with the Renaissance, the traditional world changes itself. And I would like to point out another issue here. What was the result of the dissolution of the traditional world? There is something we need to emphasize. So the integrity of object and subject is also dissolved. We go towards modernity, and the subject is giving an external meaning to the object. There is a reference I like very much. Murkart, in his famous book on Renaissance, states that the start of the modern world is initiated when Dante goes to the hill and looks at the city over the hill, and the Divine Comedy is the beginning of that dissolution. Apart from that, for example, in plastics arts, there was a person looking at the object from outside. So there are two levels of creation for modern arts. Apart from that, in architecture, there is an element of representation. So the building master turns into an architect, and there is something coming into the mind of the architect, and this person depicts the world from outside. Together with the modernity, there are some codes externally transferred into the system, and this is one of the perspectives. And there are some tools to produce this kind of art. And of course, the traditional world isn't dissolved in a sudden period of time. We know that a couple of centuries are needed to change the system. So the production of arts is taking over singularity from the modern world, and the norms and codes presented by the modernity are also taking place in this system. The Western world, or Europe, when does it face the modern world exactly? As we all know, in the 19th century. There's a total dissolution with regard to the traditional world, and we face a modern world. So we can turn to the concept of control and supervision. In the 19th century, the control or supervision is totally eliminated. So when we refer to the 19th century, there is a century of ecclesiasticism, and there are arbitrary references to the past. Let's give an example about architecture. In a single structure, you refer to the ancient Egyptian and Byzantine periods. So there are different references to the past in a single work of art. So the traditional world shows itself with controlled singularity, but the modern world starts to show itself with a plural, uncontrolled fashion. There are some codes and norms dominating over the arts, and in that part, the problem of control or supervision comes into play in the 20th century, and in that way, new fields of meaning are created in the industrialized world. Recently, or in recent days, I have prepared a book, and it's a book by Otto Wagner. So I prepared a foreword for the relevant book. When I looked at the life of Otto Wagner, so we saw progression from the lack of control to gradual control. And he went into Art Nouveau, and then he dwells into the end of production with a level of control. And in his book, he identifies the norms of control. So the modernity is managed by the norms of supervision transferred from the outside world. If we will talk about the title of the panel, Domination or Establishing a Dominance, we see how the world has changed, and now there is a control or domination over arts. So the Vienna of the beginning of the 20th century is quite important. In music, there are Vienna trio, Arnold Schoenberg, Weber, especially Schoenberg shows how these codes were established, and we can talk about the exact nature of domination here. Adolf Loos is also important in this sense. There's a close friend from Loos. We can talk about Wittgenstein. Tractatus Logicus Physiologicus is eliminated by Wittgenstein. He is quite important in this sense. So modernity has created new codes in the beginning of the century. So it manifests itself in different fields of production. And these fields work like cells. We cannot say that they are dominant over each and every field of production. Bauhaus is a cell. Siamese movement is another cell, or there are some singular manifestations. The functional paradigm of Bauhaus is very well known by us. It's an important paradigm in terms of the transfer of norms and codes. We still use it, and it is still valid. in terms of architecture and arts. Kandinsky and Bauhaus actually guide these area in terms of the discipline of design, in terms of identifying the codes that are decisive for domination. The second Vienna school is quite exemplary because it's a very nice example in terms of music. We see a gradual dissolution of Torrente in the 19th century and in the beginning of the 20th century. There are some composers such as Arnold Schoenberg that are quite influential in this sense. He takes initial steps in this sense, and atonal composition is developed by him in 1911, and Torrente is totally eliminated. Anton Weber is also eliminating from tonality. What does tonality mean? There is a central sound that is dominant in music, and the entire structure is developed over that structure. He leaves that notion. After he left that notion, he cannot express or establish the norms creating the structure, and Weber, Schoenberg, and Albanberg composes some atonal music like pieces of 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or 20 seconds. It is obvious that the music needs codes to make its system functional, and that is discovered by Schoenberg. And Schoenberg states that I have discovered such a system that German music will establish domination for another century. So he finds dodecaphonic system. It is based on a simple mathematical permutation. A sound occurs within 12 sounds, and other 11 sounds need to emerge for the other sound to emerge. So a singular type of music is eliminated in this way. He composes his music in 1923 through dodecaphonic system. It is confused with a tonal structure, but it's wrong. Dodecaphonic structure is not a tonal structure. And seriously, first of all, after 1933, we see Nazi regime, and there are nationalist movements in Germany and Italy, as well as Soviet Union. This modernist structure is rejected by the Soviet Union. And after the end of the World War II, in a short period of time, modernist composition becomes dominant. The journey of modernity in other fields is similar to the dodecaphonic structure. It is not quite very different. After World War II, modernist system becomes dominant everywhere. In 1950s, it is having an established state. which is approved. The norms transferred externally, and that create a domination are showing reactions to singular domination. There are some reactions we see at the end of 1960s, and in the second half of 1970s we see a postmodern movement, and the art must relieve itself of its shackles. This postmodern movement is against domination. So in the production of arts or architecture or design, we are against domination. However, this reaction, this reaction is manifesting itself in postmodernism. There are also some reactions against the historical side of the 19th century, and postmodernism is using the arts perspective in a different way. There are some plastic palms that are manifested in postmodern system, and the leading figures show themselves in this way. Of course, we can also move to other fields, but in music, in the second half of the 1960s, we see some reactions. So there is a music genre rejecting the norms of modernity, and the music is trying to make people listen to things that sound good for them. There's an article by Schoenberg. It's an article against repetition. We can also say that repetition and embezzling something are quite different. So minimalist music emerges in the USA. Steve Ryland, Terry Ryland, Philip Glass are quite leading musicians in that field. The first rise of postmodernism is bring into the agenda to the lack of norms, and postmodernity has not lasted a lot, and this movement has come to an end in a short period of time. So I talked for 20 minutes as an introduction. In this context, recently, I would like to give the floor to Emre Zeytinoğlu, who is producing lots of work on theoretical part. What would you like to say about this issue? I would like to continue from where you left off. I will not focus on music, but I would like to talk about the issue of norms. For example, domination, or the issue of domination, is related to the relation of philosophy and aesthetics. They turned into ideologies and they take those ideologies from codes and they bring about some consequences for them. I would like to talk about those consequences. For example, these philosophical and aesthetic integrity. We cannot reject them, but we need to define these concepts separately, but we do not know them exactly. Humanism, subject, object, they are integral and they are intertwined with each other. They flow into each other, they interact with each other. We agree with that thought, but we don't know how to separately define them. It is better not to know them separately because they are integral to each other and they are not fixed and they don't have any fixed meaning. Although they are defined in the context of codes and turned into ideologies, but in general, they don't have any clear-cut definitions or codes. Therefore, this integrity doesn't provide us with any fixed integrity. It is flowing all the time. So there is an ongoing relation between subject, object, and humanism. If the owner of this integrity is human beings, then human beings need to be monitored in practical ways. So it gives us the opportunity of expanding the field of criticism. Let's talk about the relations of people with each other. And there is a society which is created by those relations. There are also some relations of people with the objects. They are not always the same. Many conditions affect human behaviors, their relations, and they are quite variable. The variability of human beings is based on the definitions of humanism and subjects, and they force the art to change. These are quite ordinary and they will not receive any reaction. So I, I don't want to give any reference in this first part. The relation of modern period with art is just for looking for problems and criticize them with other works of art. For example, in the first quarter of the 20th century, we see an avant-garde movement.
Eleştiri yapmanın birer nesnesi haline gelmeye başladığında
when artworks start to become a subject of criticism, then they become some subjects of criticism, and the aesthetic contexts, if they are involved, then the problems that those works will incorporate and the criticism they will attract will never end. And the sphere of criticism against them will definitely expand. So, to elaborate more on that, against any artistic work, the criticism that happens at any given time and the expansion of this is actually related to the meaning of humanism. And we feel the responsibility to remind this all the time. We're talking about aesthetic, but what should be the context of it? What does this word mean? In Greek, the word aesthetic means information, knowledge that is obtained by senses. But the Greeks also use it in the sense that this is about the emotions that they evoke in human beings. So aesthetic belongs to one single person. So the knowledge from senses, the feelings and emotions from senses, and the intuition and the perception are all involved. So when we talk about aesthetics, then this is related to human beings, and this is a human-centered ontological view indeed. And the moral aspect of a human being is very much concerned here. There is some generalization, and at the most extreme point of that is humanism. And in the history of philosophy, in most of it, Cicero used the word humanism. And when we are assigning meanings to that, we're talking about an essence of human beings. This is what is assumed. And still, this word never had a self-coding nature. As in every word, with humanism, the changing conditions made an impact that evolved it and necessitated a reconceptualization of it. And there was this need of, building new words like transhumanism and posthumanism in the sense that we're discussing them today. So, the word humanism overlapping with human beings in terms of assigning meanings to the word, of course, there have been some fluctuations. And art, similarly, has been influenced by discussions about art and this shift in meaning and definition. This is quite natural. The social system established by human beings actually are subject to some changes in human behavior. So men become actually a prisoner of or a captive of the system that it establishes. This means that there is a flexible, ever-changing, ever-evolving structure shifting from one action to the other, but every time, each and every time, in relation to epistemology, this has to be re-represented. This is always to be taken into consideration. The nature, myths, beliefs, faiths, the ancient cultures, they all extend to today. And actually, if human beings are to assume a nature, then that is not about being a subject, but it's about, rather, it's about variability or changes. It has to be something in that sense. So this variability has been discussed throughout history. In philosophy, the presumption is that men are born with inevitably unchanging attributes. This has been defended for a long time, but then the perception has changed. So new discussions have emerged, and they have always been on the agenda. That's why I previously said that quote unquote ontological, as an ontological being, is that what human beings should be considered against? Or is it about an existential perspective? This is an ongoing process. So let's go back to aesthetics. So discussions about men, about human beings are ongoing. And between aesthetic and this ontological structure or this existence have also made an impact on aesthetics. So I have to tell this. This may be a little bit complicated, but we have to set one of our feet on the ground. In 19th century, Kant actually described a secular subject, And at the beginning, aesthetic was a nice and posh concept, and some qualities and attributes were also considered, but Kant said that the form of the perceived subject was actually established by the object. So anything that is related to the object, everything innate that it has, was dependent on the design of it. So between perceivable and imperceivable things, there was the rationality of the subject, and this was all about secularism. So perceiving that there are things that cannot be perceived. So using reason to that end, and the practical and unconditional necessity involved here. What kind of action should evolve, or what kind of behavior should evolve into what kind of action? So we are perceiving the imperceivability of this, the impossible perceivability of this. And from that philosophy, this is the only thing that can be expected, actually, in terms of moral metaphysics, and the criticism of a practical mind is telling about this. We are walking towards the borders of reason, but we cannot still discover it. And this is what is expected from philosophy. Nothing can be expected from philosophy, he says. So there are cases, facts, and causality, and he delves into it. He discusses concepts, and he trusts in the reason of mankind, and human beings start to get coded. So there are some existing conditions in human beings, and can use reason to move away from generalization, and it can become a transcendental being. So this is all about getting reason at the center. So human beings use their senses to sense things, and as a result of all of these, a representation of this emerges in human mind. Kant's transcendental logic actually goes back to Aristo, actually, to the ancient philosophy. And in terms of philosophy and aesthetics, and especially on human beings, this is the point in the modern era that we should start discussing. So the sense of logic in Aristotle's work is very clear, and the absolute knowledge of subjects and objects could not be achieved and attained. And Kant actually stated that the representations of such things could be the judgment of human beings, and actually truth was coded. According to what? According to the law of independence and morality of human beings. So to speak roughly, truth is a product of a code of thought. So in terms of aesthetics, the spirituality was also involved, and Kant, in the end, represented the ideal subject, and he coded it and he created it. And with all those interrelations, he identified the ideal society and the ethical rules. He was going to create them and he was going to implement them. But this was also a fictitious community. Please remind me of the time. Before my time is over, please warn me 2 minutes ago in advance. And
bilmekte, bilmesi gerekmekte. Bu nedenle
It is required to know what is desired, and therefore the human mind should go beyond a perceivable world. And of course, there's a fine point here. Naturally, it all goes to a point of infinity or immensity. But we're speaking about a world of concept, a world of design, coding. And there should have been an objective method, which is rather about thinking. So, switching back to aesthetics, we can say that it is not possible to use coding or codes to represent the aesthetic. And although this has been, the concept of aesthetic has been epistemologically defined, in general, this was not very appropriate. At that point, Terry Eagleton actually attracts my attention. He writes, if aesthetics has such a dominant role in the modern era, then this is definitely based on the variability and changing, evolving nature of the concept, because there is a lack of function involved, and under this lack of function or this functionality, it can actually represent so many functions. And Eagleton actually states that such variability makes it very useful, renders it very useful, and makes it possible to create other critical spheres and enables aesthetic to produce new concepts. Can you wrap up, Emre? Okay, one last minute. Okay, thank you. In the second part, I can elaborate more on that. I'll try to focus on Marx, recreating humanism and recreating a society was all he longed for, but humanism and subject they were both ideally created. And just 1 century later, why does it have to be created in the hands of Marx again? So, a subject, then, even if it remained ideal somehow, actually, indeed, it was not the case. So, Marx had to represent it, to present it again. So, in the second part, I'll revisit this point. Thank you, Emre. So, Zafer, Emre Zeytinoğlu talked about the philosophical aspects of especially aesthetics. In the second part, I believe he will focus more on aesthetics. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay. Now, directly, we can go into the object. So based on your production, I'm sure there are things that you have to say about domination and arts, both from a general perspective and specifically about your own production of your own creation. If you could elaborate on that, thank you very much. Thank you. I wish all of you a good day. And before starting my remarks, I would like to thank dear friends and colleagues for organizing this workshop, I may say. This is an important topic because a schizophrenic culture has been created in this complexity of concepts, and that actually extended to the community, to the society, and therefore there are many people at the moment who cannot understand what another one is saying. Of course, I'm speaking about non-intellectuals, and there is a complete complexity of concepts. So in terms of domination, both Aykut and Emre actually provided us with great insights. But rather than domination, what I understood from your words is the influence of the artist. Domination is a very strict word. But of course, this domination dates back to the times when people lived in caves, and this has been debated and criticized. So art is a tool for sustaining life, and the main cause of human beings is to survive in the nature. Because once human beings switch to this ready-made tools, the world of ready-made tools, then they started to fight, if that's the word, with the nature in terms of how to sustain their lives. And art has been a tool in this sense. Emre previously covered this point elaborately. Art is a way of acquiring another knowledge in association, in dialectical association with nature. And there is some causality and there is an experience distilled from it. This is how human beings acquire information. But of course, as it is the case in science, this is not a methodical knowledge, piece of knowledge. In advanced stages, mathematician says we feel by intuition, we prove by experiment. So I was asked about this. Is this about the intuition of fortune tellers or saints? And I responded, the intuition we're talking about is based on natural experience, on life experience. So this is what Poincaré stated. As you mentioned previously, the artistic norms, there is no norm in art. The norm in arts is a lack of norms. There are no rules, no norms in art. But even that has some rules. Just like, infinity. A lack of norms has certain norms. Because it all boils down to the way of life. And every humankind creates its own way of art. And that is why art is shaped and formed depending on our way of life. So art is a reckoning of man with the nature and man with man. So, as you both raised previously, we talked about science, the nature of art, but still it is not possible to come up with a precise definition or create a precise norm. That is why, in universe, there is only one thing that doesn't change, which is the fact that everything changes. So if everything changes, norms will also definitely change, and the rules of science will also change. And we know very well that as our knowledge changes, truth also changes. The face of truth changes. Before microscopes were invented, we didn't have much information and knowledge about germs. So the truth changed after the invention of the microscope. And the norms or aesthetic rules of art will definitely change as well. So there is not an ever-existing norm of art. And art is an act of changing the environment. Taking a stone and carving it out into a weapon. So this is about changing the environment, changing life. So art is all about changing the environment, changing itself, changing subjects, changing objects. And as the environment changes, the artistic understanding will also change. And in that regard, art is the school of thinking. It is the school of thought and of getting free. So I talked about reckoning. Mankind reckons with the nature. And there are these natural events in the past that mankind tried to reckon with. And with the Neolithic age, dualist thinking emerged rather than the monist one. So rather than monist opinion or thinking, there has been a shift to the idea of God and to, considering unknown reasons for things that cannot be explained. That is why, from the very beginning, mankind got involved in this reckoning, and this triggered a change of norms in art as well. So depending on the way of life, art has changed form, and the concepts assume different meanings. And in time, when mankind started to think freely, rather than reckoning with the nature, then people started to reckon with the God. In ancient times, gods were conceptualized as human beings. So they descended down from the skies, for instance. And in Mesopotamia, in Hittite cultures, and in Cretan culture, there has been a combination in this type of thought. And therefore, rather than reckoning with God in the third era, and I'm trying to summarize, once the sovereignty of the church started to get eradicated, things changed, especially starting from the 17th century with Renaissance and with the Enlightenment. Human mind started to come to the front, and scientific inventions came to the fore, and art lost superiority. And Russell says, for about 4 or 5 centuries since Galilei, science ruled. It's this almost a century or 2 centuries of scientific domination actually ruled out art, Russell says. So, science, is it about being free, or did science set human beings free and made them happier? The comfort brought along by science and technology, at a time when mankind is discovering the space and there are significant changes in gene technology, still didn't make human beings happy. The machines, the electrons, the space, the stars. People get to know these much closer, but if this time had been spent in order to get to know people better, then people would have been happier. This is what Russell says. So this is the age of science. The mankind nature, mankind machinery, and mankind technology dilemmas are all in the forefront, and this brought along some unhappiness. I'm not against science, but this is the dilemma, the conflict that mankind suffers from. And in the modern era, there's a definition. Technical civilization a state of law is all about modernity and totalitarian experience and the forgetting of the existence called or creature called human beings. So art lost importance in the face of all these scientific advancements. But still, if we still have famine and terrorism, environmental pollution, or wars around the world, if such problems still exist, and if, as Dada says, at the turn of the century, the world suffered from 2 wars, and the civilization drove mankind into cannibalism. So if still the most expensive thing on the face of the earth is weapons that are used to kill people, then everything's in vain. So science has its own rules and norms, and it has to revisit them. It has to assign them, appoint them some moral meanings. So rather than the domination of art, this is about the domination of science, I think. And apart from domination, between science and art, there is not much difference. They all originate from nature. So art releases mankind from domination. But how will that happen? As people get freer and they engage in art, then their creativity becomes free and will not serve either science or technology. It will be autonomous, and mankind will have a better opportunity to express itself and will get freer because art makes free and it makes you think, and especially visual arts, as Arnheim states all the time, throughout life 80% of the experience of a human being originates from visual perception, and neurology also proved this. This is a fact known since the time of Da Vinci. So I had to recall his name. So perception, visual perception, matters a great deal for human life. And wherever there is a lack of visual perception, we cannot speak of an entire success. So training and educating people via visual perception, teaching them to use their vision is quite important, and it gives pleasure. Pleasure is another concept that is debated, but still it is a fact that, in my personal opinion, art is the infinite variation on earth and the infinite perception of the world, and it is about not serving anything. So the pleasure distilled from there brings along a sharp, bright mind, and this is all about the creation and the products of that mind. So there is a need for a certain level of intelligence, intellect, and also excitement. And this is how mankind should be fed. I believe this will release all of us from the domination of science or of technology, or from the domination of mankind by mankind. I believe this is all I would like to say now.
Thank you, Professor Zafer. Actually, the initial speeches showed how this subject could be perceived from different aspects, but
Zafer hocamın tam bıraktığı yerden belki de ona
we can continue from where Mr. Zafer left off.
belki Emre Zeytinoğlu'nun daha
On
sonra
one side,
umarım
Emre Zeytinoğlu will
umarım artık
deliver a speech based on what I'll be referring to. I think he will be talking about the reality of the art. Is it correct? In one sense, right? Not exactly.
Ama pardon araya girsen haklısın.
But I would like to interrupt. You are right.
Yani daha önce
The speeches
aktarladığım
of
şeylerin
Mr. Zafer
çok ilginç şeyler söyledi.
will
Çok ilgimi çeken şeyler.
force me to talk about the things that are not in my agenda. Thank you.
Ben aynı zamanda baştaki konuşmamı da anımsatayım.
I would also like to remind you of my initial speech. I talked about a breaking point.
Ama aynı zamanda
At the
modernleşme
same time,
sürecinde
in the modernism process, the object of art is conveyed through representation. The issue of representation has emerged in the beginning of the 20th century, and this is one of the issues highly discussed by the circles of art. No matter what happens, the developments in technology must be discussed as specified by Mr. Zafer. There is a dialectic relation between arts and technology. And there is another consequence brought about by this development in the beginning of the 20th century. We talked about the teachings of Bauhaus and Kandinsky, and Kandinsky is quite important in terms of theory, and apart from the representation of the outer world, the inner elements must create a joint meaning according to the production of arts. Kandinsky has important theoretical book published in 1910. In that book, he talks about the interconnectivity of the artistic elements, which creates a meaning. And then this issue is also conveyed in Bauhaus teachings. He always talks about the interconnectivity of different elements. I also talked about Schoenberg's dodecaphonic system. Tonal harmony is rejected, and in parallel with that, the representation of nature is also rejected. We should always remember that when you study in the conservatory, the harmony of sounds is based on the nature of sounds. So we are always talking about tonal harmony based on this argument. So there is a legitimate area created by postmodernism for this type of argument. It is also reflected on the ontology of the object. Abstract painting emerges. I'm talking about visual arts, and I think that it is meaningful Emre Zeytinoğlu is an artist, apart from being a theoretician, and Zafer Gençaydın is also an artist. That's why I'm focusing on this area. Thus, the object itself has an ontology itself, and it goes into the center of discussion. This discussion is directed by consultivists, and the practice of ontology comes to a breaking point. Elgisinski has an article called Pruvian Rooms at a very early age, at a very early year. There is a monochrome activity in that sense. These discussions and the impact of modernist production brings the ontologist criticism to an extreme, and after World War II, there are two parallel scenes where objects are also dealt with in terms of place. We see that in the works of Duchamp, and we see some works in the beginning of the century and after 1950s. We see the production of modern art, and its context is expanded. Our main issue is domination and arts, and we can focus on this area because the production of modern art is considered as a priori, and the reality of the artistic object is rejected through this system. So this concept is rejected. We cannot talk about Penturi, and we cannot talk about the painting on the paper. So the production of arts is seeking for the solution of different problematics. Installations are also coming into play, and the artist himself or herself is having a process of thought, and the artist himself or herself is acquiring these concepts before conception, before production, and these thoughts manifests themselves in the minds of the artists. In that way, some workshops occur, and lots of artisans work in the workshops of those artists, and the ontology of the object is questioned in this way. It also controls judgments on the object itself, which results in domination. The reality of the object creates some markets, and the production of art becomes temporary. Because of these reasons, this concept is rejected outside the market itself. And when the market accepts the distribution of objects as a value, then we see some objects that refer to the past. Together with the postmodernism, I believe that this opinion is supported by many more people, but in the 20th century, there is also a background of thinking with regard to the issue, but we have to focus on the objective reality of the issue. And this problem has emerged in this way. Today, it still holds valid. Biennials are areas where this problem manifests itself. And biennials are showing some weaknesses in a gradual way, and the production of arts is shifted into an area of showing off themselves. It actually reinforces the discussion in this sense. So being temporary is discussed again. We can also talk about conceptual art, but without further ado, I would like to give the floor to speakers. They will each have 10 minutes in the second round. If that is also suitable for you, Emre, within these ontological framework, I would like you to talk about this issue. I will talk about the ontological framework that you have specified, and there are some opinions expressed by Mr. Zafer. I will talk about these issues. In the first round, I stated something. Actually, thinking about what Marx had to say, we can say that it goes beyond a code because it arranges codes in line with the current conditions, and the ontological structure and existential structure is developed again and again. The codes and structures are not fixed, and they have to be considered depending on the practice. So flexibility and art need to be considered again and again. In this context, when we look at the Romantics, Marx and especially the subsequent Marxist thinkers stay away from Romantics. If you look at Walter Benjamin and similar thinkers, they all say that these ontological abilities are only satisfactory things, and they are making the values of dominant class superior. So this is a practical evaluation at the time. Now I would like to talk about the issues that you have specified. There is something specified by Mr. Zafer. He talked about Hegel. While he is talking about Hegel, when we talk about phenomenology, Hegel says that there is a spiritual world, and Marxist thinkers criticized Hegel for revealing this spiritual world. Definition of this spiritual world is made by Hegel, and Hegel says that through science, this spiritualism can be sorted out, and science can show us what we are thinking. So to sum up, what do we have to do? We have to invent new types of spiritualism. Let's talk about technology now. As specified by Mr. Zafer, the comfort brought about by the technology, did it really make human beings unhappy? Yes, of course. But sadness or happiness, what is the definition of that? Aykut doesn't like it, but I would like to give an example from Aristoteles. Happiness is to complement yourself, to be complete as an object. to present and express yourself as a complete being. This is happiness. So the object is creating a technological world and the object becomes unhappy. Why? Because we have to consider happiness from some other perspectives. The thing that creates this technology is the subject itself, because the subject is creating machines without thinking whether it is useful for it or not, because the machines are disrupting and damaging humanism. This is the first primary factor of the subject. So this information is about to destroy the object, destroy the subject. So the human beings will always be at wars. So the subject cannot stop. I would like to give an example from Gaston Vartaş. There is a person who is seeing a log and turns it into a canoe. So do you think that he just went into the sea to catch two fishes and eat them? So the rationality of pragmatism is different. They will not stop. Technology will go toward the end. There could be a vital danger. There is unhappiness. I would like to give you another example in that sense. When this issue is discussed, lots of things come to my mind. There is a book by Rachel Carlson in 1960s. It is one of the books on ecology, and it starts with a two-page story, fairy tale. There is a pastoral place and there is a village. Then the village is being polluted through technology and nothing remains there. It's just chaos. People attribute them to bad luck. But Rachel Carlson says that this is not the consequence of bad luck or bad forces as specified in a poem. This is the making of human beings themselves. When we accept it, all qualities of the subject are based on this information and technology. Let's look at art and aesthetics. When we think about these concepts, we just talked about humanism, aesthetics, and ontology. What are the connections between them? People cannot go back to its natural or pure self. So it is not possible for people to become the same self in the past. So after you grow up, you can be a child, but you cannot be the child in the past. Traditional humanism philosophies and the theories brought about by these concepts can give us some recommendations. Don't do that, you are dying. Don't do that, you are losing your ethics, but the subject doesn't listen to them. And the relation between technology and art is, according to many arts enthusiasts, is not art. It is not based on humanism, philosophy, or ontology, or aesthetic concepts. But the subject is bringing himself or herself to this situation. Then what is done by the subject himself or herself
ve buradan bir sezgiyi ortaya koyuyoruz. İşte
is
kendisini getirdiği teknolojiyi yaratarak sanat yapıtlarını
the technological developments, and they process artistic work through technology, and we cannot discuss whether this is aesthetic or not. And
iyi olur. Aklıma geldi.
I would like to give some examples in the concluding part of my speech. Platon and Aristoteles is eliminating synthesia from philosophy, and they are transferring it to the laboratory. There are some performances through the transfer of tissues, and a book is published in that way. David Eagleman, Eric Kendall, Nick Bostrom has some texts on this issue. Think about the artistic works in that sense. Emre, thank you very much for this clear explanation. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Zafer. I would like to ask you a question, a clear question.
Şimdi az önce sözünü ettiğim 20. yüzyılda
I talked about the process in the 21st century.
çünkü sizin kendi üretiminiz açısından
I would like to briefly summarize it.
şöyle bir şey söylemiştim.
I have just stated that
Nesnenin kendi içine
meaning is intertwined with the object itself, and abstract work is created.
nesnenin kendi içine dönmesiyle
So
birlikte
turning
nesnenin
to the object itself is causing the questioning of ontology, and after World War II, the ontological questioning is destroying the borders of the object itself. So spatial context is coming into play, and the context is developed in this way. We see some pop art work, installations, and so on. However, all these developments in the production of arts
belirli tahakküm anlayışlarında ortaya çıkmasını engellemedi. Çünkü
doesn't prevent the creation of domination mentalities, because they reject each other or they question each other always. And so there is a culture of domination in that sense. How can you perceive this issue in your own production? Because you have focused on abstract work, if I'm not mistaken. In that sense, in the light of all these discussions, what can you say about these issues through the lens of your own production? Thank you.
Konuşmalardan eğer bunlara değinmeden kendi düşünceme geçmem tabii kopuk
It is
olacak.
not possible for me not to focus on what you have just said. First of all, technology is the creation of human beings, and as specified by Emre, science and technology are things where you do not think about the future. So this is a responsibility in terms of ethical sense. In free market, the laws are managed by the market itself without thinking about the ethics of the thing. So developments in science and economy are created by human beings, and this is a conflict of human beings. People are creating these technologies by themselves, and this civilization is about to be destroyed by another civilization created by human beings. The society itself is creating this paradigm, but the artists are outside this sphere. As I have specified before, artists are free people with no responsibility. Our duty is not to regulate ethics or guide the society. Artists never think about the transformation of the world.
Peki buradan nesnenin ontolojisine gelirseniz ne
Could you please talk about the ontology of the object because we have limited time?
Yaptıklarımla tabii ki soyut çalışıyorum.
Of course, I'm working on abstract things,
Bir biçim çarpıtmasından çok bir
but
düşünce yapısıyla ilgili.
abstract thinking is a school of thinking. If you cannot think abstractly, you cannot produce anything abstract. It's a school of thought. Rudolf Art adapted something by being affected by
Anlatabildim mi? Yani
Kant.
aslında soyutlama tıpkı
Actually,
bütün bilim yasaları da bir soyutlamadır. Yani
so the laws of science are also based on abstract thinking. So the law of gravity is triggered by the fall of an apple and it is applied to the entire system. So the abstract thinking is focusing on the relations of objects and reorganization of thinking.
soyutlama veya da soyut düşünce,
So abstract thinking or painting
soyutlandaki gerçeğe
is seeing the reality behind the
tek değildir.
image because the reality is not a singular thing. As our knowledge changes, the reality changes. So from Somers to Cervantes to cave painting to Picasso, from Dostoevsky to Shakespeare, all artists
Gerçeğin peşinde
are
ve gerçeğin
chasing the
hedefini
truth
yakalama
and they are trying to look for the
Orada
truth.
her sanatçı
Then
bütün
each and every artist,
veya naturalizmden tutunuz en uçuk
from realism to naturalism, from abstract thinking to conceptualization,
daha az gerçek değildir. Bunların hepsi
they are as real as the laws of physics. They are the manifestations of the lifestyle of the society, and each century
kendi düşünce yapısını
is reflecting the thinking style of the people living in that century.
ve şeye değindiniz. Bauhaus'a.
But you talked about Bauhaus, Mr. Aykut.
Gasse'nin, Ortega Gasse'nin de dediği gibi
It's also the aesthetics of machinery. So starting from the lack of human beings in arts, people are looking for machinery aesthetics
gene Donald Kuspit'in şeyi
as specified by Donald Kuspit.
her şey artık sanat olmaya başladı.
Everything has turned into art. Everyone thinks that they are artists.
En azından sanatın da yaratıcı. Tamam düşünce ürünü
Of course, the art is the product of thinking. So nothing that is actually, in order to create art, you need to think about something. Each artist is the worker of the art. So you cannot just resort to cameras or technological tools.
Bir doktora sınavında bir öğrencim
In a PhD examination,
kendi öğrencim.
one of my students
Öğrencim değil ama neyse başka bir arkadaşın öğrencisi. Bir desen çıktı karşımıza.
has showed a pattern.
Neredeyse patates gibi çizmiş modeli.
It's like a potato.
Desen yani doktora
So I have tried that. You are getting into the PhD examination. This pattern is not possible. So he says that there's no need for pattern in our century.
desen çizmek aslında doğayı
Drawing a pattern
yani anatomik
or copying the anatomy of the nature
bu tarafa aktarmak değildir. Bu aptalca.
is not transferring your ideas to the paper. Abstract thinking is the reorganization of the object. Anatomic soundness is not art in itself, so pattern must be reorganized.
Efendim gerçekleri mantıksal imgelerle ifade eder.
Science expresses
ifade eder. Yani estetik imgelerle.
technology, in technological terms, while art expresses itself in artistic terms. They all try to achieve reality. So all these concepts are the synthesis of each other. A scientist or artist observes the nature as specified by Boehringer. The analysis of nature comes from the spirit of getting to know the nature. And all surveys show that. For example,
Coca-Cola gibi bir endüstri ürünü olduğunu sanan bir kuşak var.
people think that milk is produced in factories.
Baba diyor, o da
So there is an anecdote I would like to talk about. A child is talking to her mother. So there is a chick. They are feeding at their home. So the chick dies, and the child calls her father and says that please bring some batteries. The battery of the chick has drained. So I'm not talking about all artists, but as someone who is working in an abstract way, can say that so working in an abstract way is not the deformation of the form. It's not just a formal arrangement. It's a way of thinking, or it's the reorganization of the thought. The art makes you think again. The art is an internal questioning. So a person who cannot do that internal questioning or doesn't know the nature in a proper way cannot engage in arts. So there's a saying by Van Gogh, the nature is a draft that is not completed. If the artist cannot complete it properly, then the nature is spoiled. So the technology is actually spoiling art in that way. There's a good saying by Hasan Ali Yücel. He says that machine is the extension of the brain in the outer world. Machine is giving precision to human intellect, and it may also destroy it. There are people who are using machines and they turn into machines. So staying away from nature, foreignizing from the nature causes lots of problems. You talked about Bauhaus. Of course, you are very knowledgeable about this issue. It is quite interesting that the director of Bauhaus Museum, Dr. Steinbrot, I got to know him in 1997. As you know, Bauhaus was established with the aesthetics of mechanical thinking. It was created as a culture in 1860 in England. Then German thinkers adopted it. I asked this question to the director of the museum. Why were 10 lectures assigned to Bauhaus? There were 9 painters assigned to the Bauhaus Museum or Bauhaus School. Actually, the founder of Bauhaus School has invited the most extreme painters to this school. Shortly, the people in this century or age are the fans of technology and they become the captives of these technologies. I think that brings me to the end of my speech. Thank you, Mr. Zafer.
Sorular var.
There are some questions, actually a few questions.
İlk soru bana
The
yöneldi.
first question was asked to me by Necdet Aykaç.
Tabii sanatta tahakküm meselesinin sosyal, dinsel, toplumsal ve siyasal
He
bağlamda
talks about the discussion of this issue in social, religious, and political terms, but the main issue of the panel is not that subject, but he says that this is quite important. I think this is a very good question. I haven't stated that this is a bad question. There's another question.
Galiba benim söylediğimi pek tam olarak Necdet Aykaç dinlememiş olabilir.
Necdet Aykaç couldn't listen to me properly, I guess. So
sanatta tahakkümü kaldırmaktan çok sanat ürünlerini değersizleştirdiği özgürlük
he
adına
says that rather than removing the domination in art, postmodernism is making the perspective on art in a blurry way. I talked about this issue in detail. This is the motto of the emergence of the subject, but then it leads to a liberalization.
Tabii ki bu da bir değersizleşme eğer diyorsa
Of course, this is the lack of values. Ümmü Gülsüm Soysüren asks another question. She asks a question to Emre. She says that
pardon niye kaçtı bu? Evet. Diyor ki
she says, should we change the definition of humanism because there are other beings in the universe in addition to human beings? In terms of concept, we have a definition of humanism as I have specified before or repeated. In terms of theoretical thinking, the qualities of human beings are valued, but these values are not the same. In practical terms, there are some actions to acquire them. When you get into those actions, there is a conflict. If you will not go into actions and if you will think about these qualities as a priori, this is not the case. So Marx has identified a strategy in that sense. In practical terms, it is changed. Mr. Zafer, you talked about Bauhaus, and Oğuz Coşkun asked a question. Isn't an artist with social responsibility is the carrier of artistic culture? So, what do you think about this question? Isn't the art the carrier of culture? Of course, this is the case. If I'm not mistaken, it's the carrier of emotion. Isn't the art the carrier of culture? Of course, it's the carrier of culture. So the history of culture is the history of art itself.
Yarattığı bu kültür dediğimiz şey, uygarlık dediğimiz şey.
So what we call as culture is the culmination of physical and spiritual values.
Aşağı yukarı 300'e yakın tanımı var.
There are nearly 300 definitions of culture. What I like the most is as follows. Culture is a lifestyle.
Kalkışımızdan yemek yiyişimize kadar veya da araba
It depends on how we drive or how we eat. If you haven't created the culture, if you haven't created the tool, you cannot create this culture. So cars turned into the machines of death. We haven't invented the cars by ourselves, so we haven't acquired this culture from the beginning. So culture is a way of thinking or behavior. So art is not only the reflection of emotions, it's the blending of thinking and emotions. Kant defines it in a good way. So art is a game going between the mind and thinking. People are an entity of nature and thinking. If you don't have any healthy mind, you cannot produce anything. And people are also entities of emotions. And finally, people like playing games just like children. So the origin of art comes from playing. Other people talk about some other notions. So art is the culture itself. As specified before, science has not developed any concept in its field, but the art is the pioneer of technology, starting from Leonardo da Vinci to the dynamics of the French Revolution specified in the books of Honoré de Balzac are quite good examples for that. Modern psychoanalysis was embedded in the works of Shakespeare, such as Hamlet. So there are some personal analysis. Kafka says that I learned psychology from Dostoevsky. Psychoanalysis starts with Freud, but 500 years ago, Shakespeare stated those elements in his books. Similarly, Jules Verne has created his books 180 years ago. The authors of the same century stated that Jules Verne was mad, but those things are realized today. A very interesting example comes to my mind. It's a product of popular culture, but a few years ago, I watched a documentary. There was a series called Star Trek in 1970s. Many script writers have specified lots of things in Star Trek and they turned into reality in our age. And I would like to say something else. Those things do not into discoveries. Actually, those things have projects and are ready. So we shouldn't ignore the popular field and superior art. We shouldn't make any comparison between them. Today, humanism, philosophy, aesthetics, and theories do not say many things, but these are reflected in popular culture through movies and novels. They analyze the subject. The creative nature of the subject is discussed by them. So what you are saying is quite appropriate.
Şimdi efendim yine sanıyorum iki
But
soru daha var.
there are two more questions, if you allow me.
Cem Özal diyor ki elbette
Cem
sanatın
Özal
kendi içerisinde
says that,
kurallar koyarak ve yaşam
of
pratiklerinde
course,
değişiklikler
art
sonucu
establishes some
gelmesi
rules and changes them depending on the current conditions, and we can discuss about domination in that field. But
sanatın bir başka yapı tarafından
what do you think about the use of art as a tool of domination by another structure? So, are you talking about politics?
siyasete, sosyal bağlama
Of
göre
course, we can also talk about politics and social structure.
gibi bir sonuca varabiliriz buradan. Sonra efendim Fırat Kuluman
Then there's another question by Fırat Kuluman.
Aykut Beyciğim, izin verirseniz bir cümle söyleyebilir miyim?
I would like to say something if you allow me.
Şu var, sanatın kendi içindeki tahakkümü dediğimiz şey. Andrei
So,
bir sözü vardır. Diyor ki,
Andre has a saying, art dies with oppression and lives with freedom. So this is not oppression by external sources. So the artist has a self-discipline. A person who cannot discipline himself or herself cannot engage in any art production. So you need to be lonely, but not in the schizoid terms. So you need to feed yourself from loneliness, and you need to allocate some time for yourself. So you need to be alone with your craft. This is the end of our interpreting service. Thank you for listening.
Yani sanat, dışarıdan yapılan tahakkümü sanat kesinlikle reddeder, etmelidir bence. Geleceğe kalacaklar da zaten dışarıdan yapılan baskıya boyun eğmeyenlerdir. İşte küratörmüş, galericiymiş, efendim koleksiyoncuymuş, efendim eleştirmenmiş vesaire. Bunlara pabuç bırakan, bunların aklına ihtiyacı olan hiçbir kişi
Peki.
görüşüm budur.
Peki hocam. Peki sevgili hocam. Tamam.
Aykut,
Fırat Kuluman
pardon.
Söyle Emre'ciğim, buyur canım.
Ben de hocam gibi bir küçük ara istiyorum senden. Biraz önce senin söylediğin şey üzerine bir şey aklıma geldi. Mesela Walter Benjamin popüler alana çok ilgi göstermişti, biliyorum.
Tabii.
Çünkü sinema önemliydi onun için. Ve onun popüler alanın olanaklarını hep anlatmaya başladı ki 1935-37 arasında da Adorno'yla bir şeyleri vardır, mektuplaşmaları. O mektuplaşmalardan bir tanesinde popüler alanı böyle anlatırken benim hani şimdi savunduğum gibi Adorno ona dedi ki siz dedi yüksek sanatın olanaklarını küçümsüyorsunuz dedi. Yani aslında sizin söylediğiniz her şey yüksek sanata ait şeyler. Şimdi bir de bunu tersine çevirdiğimiz zaman popüler alandan gelen her şeyi yüksek sanat adına reddettiğimiz zaman o reddetmek işte küçümsemek anlamına geliyor yüksek sanatı. Bu ikisini iyi düşünmek lazım ayırmak için.
Ama a priori hepsini kabul etmek de değil tabii.
Ya, elbette yani. Toptancı bir şey söylemiyorum.
Ama cevap tam Adorno'ya yakışan bir cevap. Tam Adorno'luk bir cevap. Evet. Şimdi burada Fırat Kuluman şöyle bir şey söylemiş. Felsefe, bilim, teknoloji vesaire gibi sanatta tahakküm altındayken tahakkümden kurtuluşun tek yolu olarak sanatı görmek eksik kalmaz mı? Böyle bir şey söylenmedi bu panelde. Yani tahakkümden kurtuluşun tek yolu sanattır denmedi.
Hele ki ben hiç söylemedim öyle bir şey.
Hiç kimse bir şey söylüyor.
Evet,
Bunu
ona
ben de
karşıyım
söylemedim,
yani.
Zafer Hocam da söylemedi. Peki. Efendim, evet, bunu da. Bir de en son Tanpınar güzelin öldüğünü ifade etmiş. Sormak istediğim şu, çirkin nereye varacaktır? Önceden güzeli anlatmak için çirkinden faydalanan sanatçılar artık çirkini anlatmak için güzeli malzeme olarak mı kullanacak? Süleyman Yiğit böyle bir soru sormuş. Tabii bu da
Güzel
çirkin...
seçim meselesinden değil de daha çok işte Zafer Hocam da detaylı anlattı, bir yüceltme meselesi. Yani tinselliğe
Evet.
giden bir durum var yani. Ya şimdi değil. Yani
Zaten
kuramları ilk modern kuramlar tabii yani.
estetik yüzde evet. Ayrıca da günümüzde estetik üzerine yapılacak bir kuramsal tartışmada o tartışmanın vokabülerinde olmayacak iki sözcük varsa bu çirkin ve güzel
Güzel ve
sözcükleridir.
çirkin, evet.
Peki.
Aykut Bey, şimdi güzelle ilgili izin verirseniz bir cümle eklemek isterim.
Lütfen.
Güzel son